is about, under our theme, Mission and Older People, is about the words older people. I want you to tell us from your particular perspective and role what this description means to you, and then I'm going to go right round the group and ask them the same question.
I think it's a difficult term to define because it's not, it can become a generic term. So we start to classify people because they're older, whatever that may mean. And I think there are two definitions I would want to add into that. One is that we're talking here about people aging rather than being aged. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And that's something which we all share. You know, from the moment we're born, we are aging. So there are all sorts of different parameters we then look at in terms of mobility or awareness or experience and positive things like skills and attributes that people bring that are almost defined because they're older, because they've gained so much experience as the years go by. So I think we have to look at it in both those ways. We also live in a time when I think we have to redefine what we mean by older people and what they're capable of and who they are and where they come from. When I'm talking to my own groups in the Guild, and I'm General Secretary of the Guild, that one of the issues that we come up against is people having a perception of what an older person looks like almost. And yet we live in an age when Mick Jagger is 70, you know, and so what do we mean by an older person? And I think we have to look at it in that context. So I think we have to look at older people as, yes, they have particular issues that arise from being older, but at the same time, they are different people. They have different views on worship, they have different theologies, they have different social experiences, they have different family experiences, different domestic experiences, and so on. So while, yes, we're acknowledging that there's a group who are older people, within that there's a very, very rich tapestry of people as well, and that's absolutely crucial. And we can't define people just by their age. So yes, older people have certain issues around them, and all of the panel will explain some of those, but issues about end-of-life issues or your perceptions of faith issues and so on. One example I have is from a conversation that I had with that started our Golden Age project, which we'll talk about later, I think, was with two women who had been in church together for many, many years and were now in their 70s. And one had discovered that her partner was terminally ill. And she said, "This is making me question my faith." And the other one had said to her, "But in a sense, why? Because you've always known about these issues. You knew it could happen to you. Why should it make a difference now that it has?" And she said, "Because it's me." So the questions she was asking within church about faith, end of life, about her own well-being, about her partnership and so on, were very different from the ones that she'd been asking when she was 20 or 30. And I think the church has to be very aware of that we can't just presume because people have been there for 50 years that we can take them for granted, and that we know what they think and we know what they want. Because in fact, their questions, their experience, their own understandings are changing at the same time.
Thank you. Just pass the microphone along to Sandra then. She can tell us who she is and answer the same question.
My name is Sandra Carter. I come from Mayfield Salisbury Church in Edinburgh. Older people, well, they are us. We're all aging, and we're all going to be older people. They are us is the quote from Harriet Mowat. At Mayfield Salisbury, we're a lively, active congregation, but much, not all, but much of the action is led and executed by older people, the active elderly, if you like, or the active retired, if you like. But who are we? Some of us are still working. Some of us are disabled. Some of us have families. Some of us don't have families. We're a huge bunch, just a great mixture of people who happen to be older. We're poets, we're musicians, we're people. At Mayfield Salisbury, we have a series of festivals, and in 2011, our festival was celebrating ageing and faith. And in order to plan that festival, we asked the experts about ageing and faith, and that was a group of older people in the congregation. They became known as the Wisdom Group, and then became affectionately known as the Wise Women. And their task was to tell us what they felt about ageing, and what they wanted as they aged, They came up with some interesting answers. They wanted to carry on learning. They wanted to continue to be able to be creative, to be active within the capacity that was available to them. And they wanted to socialize, they wanted to have fun. And that was what they felt would be a good part of a healthy old age. And that included celebrating their faith. What they significantly said was that we're all working towards why faith matters. Of course, not all older people have the confidence to articulate that or are able to communicate that. So that's part of the journey that we took with a particular project, our celebration of ageing in faith, and what followed from that into the context of today's discussion.
Thank you very much. Alan, what does older people mean to you in your work?
Okay. I'm Alan Logan. I'm the Director of Older People Services for Crossreach. Older people, when I think of what does older people mean, I think of two words, and that would be wisdom and experience. Unfortunately, the societal restrictions that are placed upon our desire, within this country particularly, to label people means that they are the only group of people who have a negative connotation to that phrase. Because when you describe what an adult is, it just sort of flows, doesn't it? You don't think of something which is attached to age. So automatically when you think of an older person, you think about ageing, as Ian has said, and you think about the ailments that come with ageing. And some people think of dementia, but dementia is not a normal part of ageing. When we think about an older person, when we think about the wisdom and we think about the experience, unfortunately, we classify within social care older people as a group of people who will require a certain degree of support, a certain degree of nurturing and encouragement, which can often have a patronising and condescending connotation, which contradicts exactly what I said at the beginning about that wisdom and experience, because it is to the older person where we invariably go to have the younger skill and knowledge base topped up and enhanced. But unfortunately, within a social care environment, it is looking towards what people cannot do. It looks towards failings, and therefore services that are provided don't look towards potential, and they don't look towards fulfilment. And when we design services and when we design new initiatives, whether they are church initiatives or whether they're social care initiatives or initiatives in our society, we don't really think about the older person joining that as someone who will be a long-term member of a group who can bring that experience and wisdom and something new. And as we move through the questions, I'll speak a bit more about that.
Excellent.
That's what I would think.
Thank you. Neil.
My name's Neil Watson. I'm the manager at William Wood House. Older people to me is the people I care for, the people I see every day, the people who have driven me to do a better job. But I would like to pick up on something that Alan said. How old do you need to be an older person? I know from my own personal life that in the morning when I get up, I feel old. And when I go to bed, it's getting earlier and earlier, I feel old. But you wouldn't class me as an older person. So how old do you need to be? For me, there are many, many opportunities within older people's care, which is my main role in terms of promoting quality, developing services, integrating within the community, and making those connections, making wider connections, changing people's perceptions of what older people can and can't do. We spoke about it earlier during the tour. There are very, very strong perceptions about what care homes do, about how people are cared for, how older people are cared for. But we as a group and a community will be able to change that in the future.
Great. Thank you. Tom.
Thank you. My name is Tom Nelson. I'm the minister, parish minister in this area, which is in my parish is William Wood House Specialist Care Unit. But an area of Glasgow, south side of Glasgow, where there's lots of prosperity and people are living much longer nowadays, reflecting society, of course. For me as a parish minister in this area, older people, well, it's very difficult to put a definition on age of an older person. One used to think of a retired age, you're older if you've retired. But now, of course, we don't know when people retire. Also, people will have responsibilities well into their old age, as it were, for grandchildren and looking after children, etc. So it's a very mixed bag when you say an older person, where all of that, as Sandra said, that is us. My younger children would call me old when I was only in my mid-30s. So what is an older person? From parish ministry perspective, my congregation is probably typical of the average parish in Glasgow. I believe the average person who is a worshipping person in Glasgow, and it was a survey last year, is 62 years of age. So my congregation, very typical of that, older people keep the church going. They are the experience, they are the commitment, they have the time perhaps. But increasingly, an older person to me is perhaps somebody not only with increasing responsibilities and demands, but perhaps decreasing stamina and ability and physical abilities. And so we've got people who are keeping our congregations going, but there are also people with increasing need. Many people with dementia or memory loss, great need, increasingly a need for care in the community where churches like ours are trying to address. And so there's a whole spectrum. When you say older people, it's us, it's life, and it's a rich tapestry which we enjoy being part of, and it's a responsibility, as Leviticus tells us, to look after the elderly. Who are the elderly? Good question.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Maureen.
Thank you very much. I'm Maureen O'Neill. I'm Director of Faith in Older People. It's a small voluntary organisation which was set up by Malcolm Goldsmith, who was a minister in the Episcopal Church. And what he recognised was that there were a number of people in his congregation who, because they became less abled, became less obvious in their congregation and more isolated. So he determined that there should be support for people. So the emphasis is on creating and maintaining community connections, enabling people to continue to worship as they would wish, and keeping their faith connections wherever they happen to be, whether it's at home or in hospital or in care homes. So that was really critical. But part of it also is celebrating the fact that we are growing older and that people are living to a greater age. And that doesn't stop us from contributing to society in general. And that might not be because we are wonderful riding a bike and it's active aging, but there's a spiritual element to us growing older, a time for reflection that is also important. But I think from what colleagues have said, it's very much about maintaining people's identity. We don't want to stop being Sandra or Ian. We want to retain that. And so the spiritual dimension is really important. And I think when we went to Williamwood today, there was a wonderful example of making sure that people remember that you don't start off being old with an incapacity. So on the doors, when you look at people's history in a snapshot of photographs or little elements of who they are, that's really a huge element of your spiritual being, and your faith is part of that. And what we want to do is to make sure that that element isn't lost, that care home staff, cross streets I hope excluded, actually recognise that that is, you're dealing with an individual who has these elements, whether it's faith, whether it's music, or whatever it is, and we need to celebrate that much more closely. So I think I would agree with all this. My question is, we talk about adults and then we're suddenly old. Why don't we remain adults? And I think it's arbitrary and it's based on assumptions which we really need to challenge.
Maureen, thank you very much.